Hi, welcome back. We're at week 5 now. And these are the main themes. We're going to introduce quite a few new topics this time, and I hope you enjoy them. One of them is multilateral studies. They're probably, in my opinion, the most interesting and useful reports that are available right now are ones that come from some of these more multilateral organizations. I'm speaking about the World Bank, United Nations, and many of the others. I've already given you a few of them from other similar kinds of organizations. But so I do want to demonstrate particularly the World Development Report, which is put out by the World Bank, and the Human Development Report. And then another major feature this time, we're going to introduce the Yali's question. That is the fundamental idea behind Guns, Germs, and Steel, which won a Pulitzer Prize about over 10 years ago for its author, who makes the very bold and extremely controversial suggestion that culture really isn't nearly that important. He gives it some importance, but he says the reasons that nations are shaped and their progress is shaped is geography, not culture. That's why maybe Atahualpa could have conquered the Spanish instead of the other way around, having a small contingent of Spanish soldiers come in and completely conquer Atahualpa's region in Peru. Similarly for Cortez in Mexico. And then we'll also have introduction this time to Robert Putnam on social capital. That's his very famous area. I've got a couple of readings and an interview with him. And I think you're going to find that a very seminal sort of idea, because he's basically saying that one of the cultural issues that's changing in the world is that there's not nearly as much working together in a concerted way towards some goal. His famous book was Bowling Alone, where he described the reduction in bowling leagues as one of the many ways he was going to examine that topic. Okay, here are the assignments. Another very interesting kind of multilateral report is one put out by the European Union. This is an index of happiness and satisfaction. It's a widely reported variable, and this happens to be a description of by nations and also by a lot of other different variables concerning happiness and satisfaction. Very interesting. I think you'll like it. Guns, Germs, and Steel, I mentioned that. We do the first part of it. What is social capital? That's a brief OECD document. Bowling Alone, it's the original manuscript, really, you might say, the first article he wrote, followed by a book by that subject. Robert Putnam is a professor at Harvard, and his newest book about the town that he grew up in, we'll be talking about that later on in the course. There's also a lecture with Putnam, Gergen, and Murray that I think you'll find interesting. You can spin through that. And Chris Jordan on cultural statistics. Fascinating. I hope you'll find it so anyway. Description of some statistics that maybe are not at the top of your list of statistics. They're quite interesting. I want to conclude with a couple of minutes on these two reports I mentioned, Human Development Report and World Development Report. Its title for the most recent version is Sustaining Human Progress, Reducing Vulnerabilities and Building Resilience. Ever since 1990, each year the United Nations has published a report like this, and this report plus the World Bank one I'll move to momentarily are famous and I think interesting and useful for you for this reason. They represent the very best in report writing. It gives thematically, it gives huge amounts of evidence. It's graphically very high production values, and naturally you don't have to agree with any of their findings, but I think the way they present them, it's known as one of the best examples of that sort of art anywhere. Here's an example of the graphics. This has to do with the fundamental questions. This is on page 31. Of who is vulnerable to what and why. So it describes those who are vulnerable, and it mentions different groups. To what are they vulnerable to? Economic shocks, health shocks, etc. And then why. And it's a very nice way of sort of getting us used to the idea. Whether you're thinking about a person in one of the poor countries of the world that's getting $1.25 a day on average, or in the United States, there's a new book out called $2 a day, living on $2 a day, even in this country, claiming that a couple of million people have to live as adults on that to get by. Very interesting issues, and this is what this report is about. One other quick example. This one follows up on the previous one, and it describes policies for reducing vulnerability and building resilience. And the details are contained in all the rest of this document. It's about 250 pages, so you just want to skim through it. But this is a good example because these are the policies that will actually combat these problems, preventing shocks, promoting capabilities, and protecting choices like social protection, job creation, etc. Very, very nice, tight, compact way of describing this. And the rest of it, as I mentioned, is filled with interesting issues and ideas, and very well organized. And at the end, there's lots and lots of charts, including the famous Human Development Index, which was pioneered by the United Nations. Now to the World Bank report. And here it is. This is the 2015 version of the World Bank report. The next year's will be out in a couple of months. They come out a little bit before the end of the year, so I'll definitely get you the newer versions of both of these once they're out. This one is called Mind, Society, and Behavior, and it's basically attacking some of the same general problems that the other one was describing, but in this one it comes at it in a more, you might say, cerebral way, or aiming at some of the psychological, social literature more than the developmental literature. So it's a very different, but that's one of the ways that these reports are so special, because that they approach complicated subjects in a different way every year. This chart, which is on page 34 of that World Bank report, has to do with the cognitive, the amount of cognitive help that mothers give children in depending on the country involved. And as you would suspect, in poor countries, there's not nearly as much cognitive stimulation as there is in wealthier countries. And this is one of the many charts that indicates that by separating it by low Human Development Index, medium Human Development Index, and high Human Development Index countries, and you'll find that, at least I've just found that these are very, very helpful in trying to get my arms around some of these difficult to address. Okay, here's another example. This has to do with decision making and fits perfectly into this theme that sometimes developmental decisions are made not using a standard economic model, where the deliberation is careful and the economic and behavioral outcomes are fully considered. This one reminds us that sometimes there is an automatic system that gets in the way of the deliberative system, very similar to what Shine tells us about some people who cannot get rid of their deepest, some of their deepest biases, so it affects the developmental decision-making process. So even though this looks like a psychological essay, this World Bank report, it's actually filled with just many, many examples of real countries facing real difficulties and statistical descriptions galore. It's a very, very well written and very carefully analyzed book. I want to urge you to think for yourself on this. There come some of these findings they have. You may not agree with, great, but I just want to be sure you understand how they approach it, because these two that I've just spent a little bit of time on are, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people who work in policy analysis, the very best presentations of options that you're going to find anywhere, and they're multilateral reports. Okay, that's it for this week. I hope it's a good one for you, and don't forget to get all those different deadlines met, and I'll look forward to being in touch with you next week. Bye.